Welcome to a Cigar Hustlers Podcast, episode 66. This is part 2 of the Skip Martin Chronicles. Hope you're comfortable, because we're going to keep going. Enjoy the show!
What's the average turn ratio of like pairs in the factories in Esteli?
I think you know the answer to this.
But I do. Well, I know all the answers to the majority of the questions that I'm fucking asking you.
So, the majority of people who work in cigar factories are not actually employees of the factory.
Right.
And what I mean by that is you're kind of more like a temporary employee.
Mm-hmm.
And then twice a year they let you go. They
Right.
give you a vacation payout. And then you come back and you kind of essentially start your tenure over again.
Right.
Particularly in November, you leave and then you kind of come back in January.
Right.
Or the end of November. So the reason why they do that is because there's a differentiation in the labor laws of Esteli where there are career employees and then there's just employees.
Right.
Right? So like seasonal employees. So like,
it's like part-time, full-time shit here.
The guy who runs the farm is a career employee.
Right.
This week it's 50 people, next week it's 100 people, the week after that it's 300 people, then for 6 months there's nobody.
Right.
Those guys are seasonal employees, right? Factory people, they kind of take advantage of the rule a little bit and they essentially let them go and then bring them back.
Right.
So the reason why they do that is because once you become a career employee, you have to essentially start funding a pension, which is called indemnization. And essentially they earn so much per year that you pay them out at the end of their career.
Right.
The other thing that happens is while they're working, they earn a 7th day. They get paid for Sunday. They earn a 13th month called aguinaldo. And Arlen would be the one to ask this question to, by the way. She's the one that knows all these rules. But what happens is a lot of people live paycheck to paycheck.
Right.
And a big number of people in the factories borrow money from the factory.
Mm-hmm.
Like Prestamo is what they call basically a payday loan, company store loan. So people come and they'll be like, when I first started in Nicaragua, it was, we had our first 2 employees, the very first thing they did was borrow money.
Right.
And it was, and then the next 3 employees borrowed money. And then I started realizing that everybody's on these, they borrowed $400 and they're paying it back $5 a paycheck or something.
Right.
And then what happens is, a lot of the factories won't let them get too far over their skis, and so that their last pay period they can always cover the entire amount if they decide to leave.
Right.
The other thing that happens is people will just leave so they can get a payout on their accumulated vacation and aguinaldo.
Mm-hmm.
So like if you work January, February, March, April, and they won't let you take a loan, then you'll just leave, get paid out, 3/4 of your vacation, whatever, and then you go to another factory who just most
Right.
people who are both rollers and bunchers, they've worked in 10, 15, 20 factories.
Right.
And they constantly rotate.
Right.
And people who sort tobacco, same thing. People work in packaging, even more so. So in our factory, a couple things happened early on. One, I just don't like the idea of my employees owing me money.
Right.
It's not a good look.
Mm-hmm.
So I, being, a genius, I was the first guy ever, obviously, to think, hey, we'll just put everybody on direct deposit.
Right.
Because everybody pays payroll in cash. Everybody lines up outside of the office at the end of the day on Friday. Every day you pay everybody a whole week's pay in cash. And then they put it in an envelope, and then they live out of the envelope for the week. And I thought, well, one of the big problems, the reason why these people have to borrow money is because they don't have a savings account.
Right.
So I said, well, here's what I'm going to do. I went to our Bank of America rep, came over, back, and they came over and said, well, we'll give all of your employees a checking account and a debit card and a savings account. And I'm like, well, that's what we need to do. That's genius. And so we did that, and there was like a near revolt.
Right.
Right. They all lined up on Friday. Where's my money? Hey, here's a card. All your money's at the
Your
bank.
money's right here on this card.
They're like, fuck this. They all went and lined up at the ATM. Not one of them knew how to use an ATM. They're immediately pissed off. That lasted about 2 weeks.
Right.
Before they literally tarred and feathered me. So part of the byproduct of that was, though, that everybody ended up with a savings account, which they'd never had before. Because you can't really open, like if you're a roller in a factory, going to the bank and actually opening a bank account is not easy.
Right.
But because of our relationship with the bank, we did it this way, so they all ended up with a bank account. So we went to back, and so I started my second genius idea was, here's what we'll do. You tell us how much every month you want to put into your savings account. We'll do a deduction out of your check. You won't get that in cash in your envelope. We'll put it in the bank, and then we'll match it. So you can do up to 100% of your paycheck.
Right.
So if you make $80 a week or $100 a week, if you put $5, we'll match $5. If you do $20, we'll match $20. If you put the whole paycheck in, we'll match 100%.
Right.
But you have to put in your savings account. We're a co-owner of your savings account. And then next time you come to me and say, I need my roof fixed, I need to buy a motorcycle, I need school supplies, whatever it was, then we'll let you take that money out. So anything that we would give you a loan for, we would allow you to take 100% of that savings out for that purpose.
Right.
So it's essentially borrow the money from yourself.
Right.
And we're funding half of that. So that also went over like a lead balloon. Because there was, at that time, I think we had 35 employees. 12 of them were guys. So I think like 23 women and one guy contributed to that. And the one guy was because his wife worked at the factory.
Right.
And she made him do it. So that didn't go over well in terms of participation, because it was like $2.50, $5. I mean, it's kind of fucked up. I mean, these guys don't make a lot of money. And then what I realized, what people were still coming and asking for loans for were mainly school-related things or health-related things. So, again, because I'm the smartest guy in Esteli, and everybody else has already learned all these things, by the way. So I said, well, here's what we'll do. I have a doctor. My doctor's not super expensive. Instead of getting, we don't have enough people to have like a health clinic at the factory like AJ and Placencia and those guys do.
Right.
But also the INT system is total dog shit. It's like worse than sick call in the Navy. I mean, you show up, sit for 6 hours, get who knows how many more diseases, and then they give you some ibuprofen or something.
Right.
So we start allowing to pay for them or their kids to go to the private clinic, which is it's almost no money. It's negligible. And we would also pay for half of their prescriptions, because we do 100% healthcare coverage for our employees in the U.S. And at the end of the day, we didn't have a lot of people getting sick. Really, it was more their kids.
Right.
And then their kids would get sick, then they would be out of work for 3 days.
Right.
And then that's 1,200 cigars, and then, et cetera, et
Starts
cetera.
to add up.
It scales.
Yeah, so it's like, okay. So since we've started, Esteban owned half the factory, I owned half the factory, and I never took my money out of the factory. So we had this huge account that was kind of, not huge, I mean.
Right. In Estelia's sense.
We had this chunk of money that would just accumulate.
Right.
I didn't want to pay taxes on it, because if I took it out, I had to pay 40% tax on it.
Right.
So what I did is I just moved my share of the business into this fund that would fund the matching for the savings accounts, that would fund the private doctor, that would fund. So the next thing was people would ask for school supplies.
Right.
Or school stuff. So, and it's everything from my kids. So I have 2 kids. One's in public school, so I have to buy a uniform and notebooks and pens. And then some of them, it was my daughter's in medical school, and she wants to matriculate, and I have to pay the $500 fee to get it out.
Right.
So what we started to do at that point was we said, we'll pay 100% of any education-related expenses,
right,
as long as they're getting good grades.
Right.
So we would fund the school supplies and uniform stuff up front, and then we would matriculate if they graduated with good grades. So we started doing that. So we started to chip away at all these reasons people would borrow money.
Right.
So eventually, we eventually put a policy in place. We would not lend money anymore, which if a factory won't do payday advances or lend money, that'd be one of the first reasons why people would leave.
Right.
But because we'd addressed a lot of the reasons, we never had that issue.
Right.
And at this point, the only things we really lend money for now are for someone to buy land or to buy things like they can't go to the bank and get a loan.
Right.
So we've had someone that was like our second or third employee, Sylvia, who recently just bought some land 2 years ago. She borrowed money. We paid half of the land. She paid half. She eventually paid that loan back. Now we gave her a new loan to build a house.
Right.
Esteban's like the general contractor on the house. Which, if you know how cheap and it's been the greatest thing for her having him.
Right.
There was like a whole delivery of bricks that weren't the highest quality. He rejected them. It was great.
Right.
It's a great
It's
story.
like, this
but-
isn't Lajero bricks. Send us back.
Yeah, so at the end of the day, it's not because I'm some big altruist.
Right.
It's because, first of all, it's very inexpensive.
Right.
I make really good money on the Roma side. I mean, I had money before Roma.
Right.
Arlen and I live a pretty decent life.
Mm-hmm.
But on the factory side, I haven't had to really put a lot of my own money in. It's really just my share of the factory profits that take care of these things.
Right.
But the main thing is this. We have 12 pairs.
Okay.
Out of those 12 pairs, we're one of the so Arlen's sister works at another factory that's been in Nicaragua a long time.
An undisclosed name.
Yeah.
That we can't say.
Her parents actually worked for this factory for decades.
Okay.
And she's rolled the same size cigar for like 9 years.
Right.
If she wanted a job at our factory, she couldn't get a job at our factory.
Because she only does that one size.
Because she only knows how to make that one size in the way that they make it.
Right.
Everybody at our factory has to be able to make a 5x50 Perfecto on Monday.
Right.
And Tuesday, switch Tuesday afternoon to making a 5x56, switch to making a Churchill on Wednesday.
Right.
Right. Doing Cro-Magnon on Monday and Tuesday, doing Araparaca on Thursday and Friday. I mean, there are 4 or 5 pairs that do the more difficult sizes, but everybody switches stuff all the time. And if they weren't there long term, that's a very hard thing to replace.
Right.
So we have 67 employees. In the entire history of our factory, we've only lost, I think, 7 employees.
Okay.
Like 2 have gone to Spain. One is a nurse, went to Spain to be like take care of old people.
Right.
One of them is doing daycare stuff in Spain, and then money, you can't resist it.
Right.
One of them became a preacher. One of them was an alcoholic.
Right. I like
Right.
that guy.
Yeah, he's a great guy.
Same guy, preacher and alcoholic?
No.
That's a different guy.
okay.
Totally different guy.
And then there's 1 or 2 that just didn't work out.
Right.
Like a packaging girl and one of our cleaning ladies
Right.
had a baby. She left. She had enough of being a cleaning lady.
Right.
She had a college degree and she was way underperforming.
Right.
And then we've had a few people that we've paid their way through school. They've graduated as a nurse or as a social worker or as whatever, and they've moved on.
Right.
Gladly, if they didn't, I would have fired them.
Right.
Go seriously, go do something
Right.
with your life. But making cigars or working in a cigar factory, a good roller or buncher can make as more than a teacher, and about as much as a notary, like a lawyer.
Right.
Or a nurse.
Wow.
We have 3 or 4 people that work in our factory that are finished nursing school,
Right.
and they make more
In cigars.
packaging cigars than they make.
As a nurse.
Yeah.
But your churn ratio is extremely low, obviously.
Our turn ratio is really low. To your original question,
Right.
The turn ratio in general in factories is pretty high.
Right.
I mean, there are factories that have, this lady's been here for 34 years, this lady's been
Yeah,
here
of
20
course.
years.
But like, I go into Nica Sueño and it's the same faces.
Almost you've been there for years and
Right.
it's the same people.
Right.
There's almost every factory has a sign that says experienced rollers and bunchers needed.
Right.
Right.
I can see that. I could tell the new guys that come in, but a year later they're still there.
Yeah. We did have one guy. He's one of the younger guys whose main job was kind of moving tobacco around
Mm-hmm.
and handing the tobacco to the bunchers and that stuff. And it was funny because we were like watching CNN, and Esteban had told me, hey, he went to the border. I'm like, well, why did he go to the border? He's like, he's going to the U.S. to work. And I'm like, okay, like, did he get a letter? Did he get a visa? No, he's just going. So he did the whole,
caravan thing or
yeah,
whatever?
basically.
No shit.
No bullshit. We're watching TV in the factory one day.
There he is.
There he is walking down the road.
Cuando él es en la noticías. So one day we're watching TV in the factory. No bullshit. It's Alvarito right on the because we have a TV right in the front of the factory. He's right there on the thing, like kicking rocks, like being interviewed by a border control. I'm like, what a knucklehead.
That's awesome. Dude, you did something that was pretty impressive a few weeks ago. You sent me a video, and you were by hand. You were weighing the cigars to the fucking gram.
I'm pretty good at that. Esteban's better at that than I am, but yeah.
Sorry.
Right.
I got excited. You told me about it.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, I can. I mean, you know, when you're picking up cigars all day, every day, you can differentiate.
I mean, but by the fucking gram, dude.
Pretty much. 1-2 grams. I mean, there were a couple I think I made a mistake on, but
Yeah, but overall the ratio is pretty. You're pretty accurate, dude.
yeah, I'm pretty good at that.
Right.
I sometimes I'll go up to the table and I'll pull 2 or 3 aside and I've said these are underfilled,
Right.
and then they'll be like, no, they're not. I'm like, I bet they weigh less.
Right.
How much you want to bet? Like, if these weigh less, you got to make me 5 for free. And they'll be like, okay. So then we'll weigh them. And they'll be like, fuck.
Can we talk about Macho at all?
Yeah.
So like.
So Macho is one of the 7 that doesn't work there
Right.
anymore. He never was officially an employee.
Right.
Macho is like a 70. ¿Cuántos años tiene Macho? Like 78, 78. Like he's like 75, 76 years old.
Right.
He was our security guard for like the weekends.
Right.
Actually, in the beginning, it was our full-time
He
overnight
was,
security guard.
right.
He'd come in, no shoes, button shirt, eating fish or whatever the fuck
Right.
it was he would eat. And he would just stay in the factory, make sure it didn't burn down at night.
Right.
Now we have Luis.
I mean, you know, if you broke down if you could identify the great strides that has happened with Nika Sueño and Roma Craft, I mean, those two guys are a great comparison from one end of the pendulum to the other.
So here's a story about Macho.
Okay.
So,
Mancho.
Macho.
Mancho.
Yeah.
I always called him Macho.
Yeah.
But Mancho is his name, like Nancho. But
Right. No, but
Yeah.
listen, the gringos know him as Macho.
Yeah.
That's what I call him.
So
And he was
Macho-
every bit of Macho. You
So
know.
Mancho, his
You can't
wife.
You can't call him Macho now. We're sticking with this.
¿Cómo se llama la esposa de Mancho? His wife's name is oh fuck, I forget her name. Like Marita or something.
Right.
I don't remember her name, but she's like 20 years older than him.
Right.
So she's like 90 years old.
Right.
Or 95.
She's older.
She's never owned a pair of shoes in her entire life.
No shit.
She lives like around the block from Esteban. Has for forever. And she would get like her Sunday red dress with a hat with no shoes. Like, it's crazy.
Right.
So Mancho was just one of these like, you know, odd job kind of dudes.
Right.
I mean, he's like twice my age, but I mean, the guy could like chop down a tree and chop wood for 3 days without getting tired. I mean, he's that kind of guy. So one day, Esteban gets a hint that there's something weird going on. So Sunday, he goes to church. Macho comes in. He's hanging down the street.
Mm-hmm.
Some chick walks into the factory.
Right.
Like 50 years old. So like a youngin'.
Right.
Like 55, 56.
Right.
She comes in the factory. So Esteban and Uraldi and Anthony come into the factory, knocking on the door, and Macho takes like 10 minutes or 5 minutes to come open the door. So finally he opens the door, and he's got it latched from the inside, right?
Right.
So Esteban's like, who's here? Like, nobody. It's like, no, we know somebody's here. So they're going around looking because they saw this woman walk in.
Right.
So they end up going to the girls' bathroom, and there's this butt naked 60-year-old woman, you know, and they're like, "What's going on here?" And he's like, "That's my wife." He's like, "We've known your wife for 20 years. That's not your wife. He goes, "No, that's my other wife."
That's my other wife.
So he's like 78 years old, banging a chick on the job,
Right.
in the bathroom.
Totally busted.
So Uraldi's like making a video of the whole thing, and I'm like, I don't want to see that. So Macho didn't.
He didn't pan out.
He lost his job that
Right.
day.
That was the end for Macho.
But he earned my respect.
Do you ever see him?
Yeah, we see him all the time.
Yeah?
Yeah, he's a good guy.
Just kind of stops in, says what's up.
No, I mean, when I go to see
Can I use the
Esteban
bathroom?
or Jose Mesa, when I go over there, because he's neighbors with Jose Mesa, so
Right.
it's a small town, man.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So can we talk about the USS Key West now or no?
No.
Well, shit, dude. I mean,
Did you bring up the strip club in Castleberry?
I mean that's entirely up to Skip if you want to talk about the strip club. in
The House of
Castleberry.
Babes,
Right, back in
across from the Highlight Place,
right,
all nude.
all nude. Back
Yeah.
in what? I don't think they do nude now.
That would have been 90.
No. Not over there. They didn't over there before they shut it down.
That would have been like
Yeah.
92.
I think it was called Circus when it closed down.
There was like a headliner place that was like, like the traveling strippers would go to, and then a little ways down there was the House of Babes. It was in Castleberry.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is why you
now
look.
it's
That
what?
the whole area. Well, the
But this place is no longer there.
It's no longer
Rachel's
there.
is over there.
No,
Yeah.
is it Rachel's? Okay.
Rachel's over there by
I was gonna say
Sam's.
Scarlett's, but Scarlett's is down in South Florida.
Right. Totally different.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was, when I was in the early days in the Navy, we shut down some strip clubs.
Right.
There was a place in Fort Lauderdale, too, called the Booby Trap.
Oh, it's still there.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And
Used to be a
Coconut
place
Grove or
like that over
whatever.
in Lee Road too, called the
It's
Booby
still-
Trap.
No, Booby Trap in Fort Lauderdale is still there, definitely.
Yeah, so we shut
Not that I know,
We
I'm
shut
just
that
saying.
place down a couple times. I don't know. So
See?
you want to know my origin story, like how I grew up, or?
I mean, that's up to you if you want to tell that story. I mean, like, I honestly didn't think that this interview was going to go the way that it did. Like, I had to ask questions and shit. Like, I thought that I was just going to kind of sit back and you were just going to kind of go off. But,
I'll tell
you
you
kind of held back.
I'll tell you an interesting factoid.
Okay.
So when I was in boot camp, I was in the nuclear power program, so I had to have a security clearance. And then I got pulled out of formation one day, like my third or fourth week of boot camp, and the FBI called me out. Martin, go to this thing. And so I go to this room, and there's like these two FBI guys sitting there, and they're like, "Hey, we got some questions to ask you."
Right.
And I'm like, of course you're like shaven and you've been beaten down for 3 weeks. And so I'm like, oh shit, I'm fucked. I don't like what's going on here.
Right.
So they said your application or your security clearance application was incomplete. We've been doing the background check, and you've got one of the oddest background checks we've ever done. So, fess up. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Like,
Right.
So it turned out, and I didn't even know this number at the time, I had gone to 67 different schools between K and 12.
No shit.
Oh my God.
Wow.
So my mother died when I was young.
Right.
So I have 7 older sisters. I was a late baby. My mother was actually already divorced from my dad when I was born, and she had a boyfriend. Domestic violence.
Right.
I mean, that's all I remember when I was a kid is the domestic violence and everything. And so when I was 4, the guy she was dating, the guy, she came to pick me up at like the lady who kept me during the day.
Right.
And we were walking out of the front door, and he pulls up. She's walking me down the sidewalk, shoots her in the head. She died.
Right.
So, that's not a great way to
Right.
start, right? So, my sister at that time, my oldest sister was 18, and so she had just had a kid of her own. It was like a year and a half younger than me,
Right.
and I was like this close to going to the orphanage, the Texas Boys Home or whatever.
Right.
And then she convinced the courts to allow her to become my guardian. So I ended up growing up with my sister, who had her own long list of dysfunctions.
Right.
Drug addict, alcoholic, codependent,
Right.
also in domestic violence my whole life growing up.
Right.
So, what would happen is my aunt, my mother's sister, owned a bunch of rental houses in like the shittiest parts of town,
Right.
right? Like $15,000 houses. So my sister, who got a divorce from her first husband early on, I was like 6 or 7, we would move into one of these shitty, slumlord houses that my aunt owned, and the Pleasant Grove or
Right.
Wilmer Hutchins or you name a shitty part of Dallas-Fort Worth, I lived there.
Right.
Guaranteed. And so we would move in there, live there for 3 or 4 months until my aunt would get sick of her not paying on time or something. Of course, it's a struggle. She ended up having 2 more kids. Being a single woman with 4 kids obviously is not
Right.
the easiest thing.
Yeah, no doubt.
So there were times growing up, because my mother and father both passed away, my Social Security survivor benefits were like the only income coming into the house.
Right.
So we would, she would find some boyfriend at,
Fucking
the honky tonk
Right.
or whatever, and we would end up moving in with that guy, and then there would be domestic violence, and then the sheriff would come in the middle of the night. We'd haul ass with all of our shit to some other slum house, and then we'd start school again, etc. So I had gone to a number of 67 schools,
Right.
and some of them multiple times.
You rotated back.
Exactly. So then eventually I got kind of sick of that. That's part of the reason why I did really good in school, because that was the thing that I controlled.
Right.
Right, was doing as much as I could at school, get away from the other stuff. So, plus going from school to school, you kind of had to be on your own self-paced program.
Right.
you never catch the next curriculum in the middle of,
Right, you're
Thursday you're at one school,
Right.
Monday you're at a different school, right?
Totally different multiplication tables at
Right.
different times.
I mean, but this was back when we all had library cards.
Right.
I mean, I'd spend hours in the library. In fact, one kind of an early story is I would steal books from the school library because I loved reading, and I had like a 300-400 volume book collection.
Yeah.
And so I'd bring these books home. Not that anyone really gave a shit, but it would be like, "What are you doing with these books?" And it was this is one of the few times we were at a place long enough where I could collect anything.
Right.
And then eventually the librarian came to the house and said, "This kid's like keeps taking books out of the class." So I would
He's got more here than we do at the library.
So that was my big crime, was
Right.
stealing the
Stealing
books.
information.
We always had
what it was.
hustles going on when
Right.
I was a kid. Like we'd go down to one street and we'd be like, "Hey, can you donate eggs to the food drive?" And then
Right.
we'd get a dozen eggs. Then we'd go down the next street. This egg represents an unborn child. we're collecting money for the March of Dimes.
Right.
And then we'd go down the next street, collect eggs. We'd end up with enough money to go buy some Jolly Ranchers that we'd sell at school. My very first business.
It's a nice parlay.
I don't know if I ever told you my first business was porn.
No.
Yeah, this was my first entrepreneurial venture. So there used to be drive-ins. There used to be things called drive-ins.
Okay.
I don't know if you remember these from maybe the movie Grease or whatever.
I've heard of 'em.
In the front of the drive-in would be like a playground
Right.
in front of the screen. And then in the back of the drive-in would be the projection thing, but underneath it would be the bathrooms and the concession stand.
Right.
And so we would go to the drive-in. Whoever you went with was always making out in the car. So you never actually went and stayed in the car. You would either go up to the playground or you would go back at the concession stand.
Right.
And so one time I was in the concession stand and I found like this, I don't know if it was Wii or Hustler. I mean, it was definitely not Playboy. It was like full on everything.
Right.
Magazine. So I found this. I must have been 7 or 8 years old. And we had a laminating machine in like the 4th grade.
Right.
5th grade, the teacher lounge or something had one. So we cut out these pictures from the porno mag, laminated them, with all of the really difficult decisions of, you got the full spread on this side of the page, and on the other side of the page is
Right.
this. So which one do you choose, right? You can get 4
Tough
pictures.
decisions, yeah.
Exactly. And then I was selling those laminated porn things until I got busted for that.
You got busted.
I got busted. I was always in trouble. I staged a walk out of class because when I was in, I think it was Wilmer Hutchins Elementary School, which the school district was so bad they shut it down, closed all the schools, made it part of the Dallas Independent School District. That's how bad the school district was.
No shit.
But my nephew and I were like the only white kids in the whole school. It was like 65% African American and like 30% Latin.
And then
Latino.
you.
And then 2%.
A couple Asian guys, the poor Vietnamese guys, and then us. And they had a sickle cell anemia screening day.
Right.
And so like, okay, everybody line up, Skip, you don't need to go. And I'm like, what are you talking about? I might have this.
All right.
So I demanded, I remember the principal's name was Principal Knotts.
All right.
And I demanded a sickle cell anemia test. And I was negative, but
Yeah.
Oh, thank goodness.
yeah. But when I was 14, I got emancipated when I was at Boys Ranch.
Right.
So when I came back from Boys Ranch, I had an apartment on my own. I lived off Social Security survivor benefits. I mean, free lunch, my entire life.
Right.
Welfare, every kind of welfare you can imagine, food stamps, when they were actually stamps.
Right.
I mean, every program you can imagine, up through Pell Grant, up through me being in the military, up through Hazelwood paying for my school. I've taken advantage of every federal and state welfare program there is, but I've more than paid it back now.
Right.
But
For sure.
So yeah, that's kind of why that's kind of how I got to where I was at.
Right.
You know.
You talk about the Xerox thing at all, or no?
I mean, we can. I mean, it's kind of a boring story. A friend of mine and I started a business, and then we ended up selling it to Xerox. Made a few bucks.
The end.
The end. Yeah.
Fuck, man. Jesus Christ. Cool story, bro. And there's a lighter right there.
The food stamp story is a lot more interesting than that one.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, kind of where you came from and how you turned into the person that you are is always fascinating. I think you did tell me the porn story before, though. You didn't tell me that you got busted. I just figured that it just kind of died out, or you ran out of images.
At one time, I had the NAIA record for home runs in a single season.
No shit.
I was a really good baseball player. I played Little League. It was one of the few things that I could kind of do wherever I would go, to kind of make new friends. When I would come into a new place, I could immediately drop into the school.
Play some ball?
Yeah, play ball. And then I ended up getting a scholarship to play American Legion ball when I was in high school. And then I actually played with a guy named Track Bledsoe, Todd Van Poppel, and Reed Ryan, Nolan Ryan's son, on an American Legion team out of Arlington. And because there were scouts coming for those guys, Todd Van Poppel went to the A's straight out of high school. Reed Ryan was Nolan Ryan's son.
Right.
I mean, he eventually went to TCU, but I went to Texas for about 2 weeks, got cut, and then I went to play at Wesleyan. Then I played at Mary Hardin, then I played at Baylor.
So, did you think you could make it to the major leagues or no?
No, I could have been in minor leagues.
Right.
Probably. I mean, Sparky Anderson. I don't know if you remember him. He was a great GM.
I'm not a big baseball guy.
He was the Tigers manager at the time.
So yeah, it was Detroit.
And he pulled me aside and said, "Hey, you have one of the best natural swings I've ever seen on a slow white guy."
So what happened?
I went in the Navy. I got married. Had to have a paycheck.
Right.
Plus, they were offering the signing bonus, so I got sucked into that.
You're like, sweet.
Fucking recruiters, man. There's no liars.
Do you ever? Yeah, right.
No better liars in the world.
Yeah.
Do you ever regret how it kind of played out, or?
No, man. I don't really regret anything. I mean, the hurricane turned into Roma Craft Tobac.
Right.
Every bad thing that's ever happened to me has turned into something good. So,
right.
Yeah.
So here you are.
Yeah. I mean.
Just living it up in the basement of a fucking cigar retailer store.
Yeah, exactly.
Living
the dream.
So what were you going to say? You were going to say something else?
No, I mean, like even getting sick in Nicaragua. I mean, I almost died. So, I mean.
That was a scary
even that turned
moment.
into a positive thing, I guess.
Yeah. Because you're still here. Well,
I also found out I had this heart defect, which I wouldn't have known.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
now if shit hits the fan, you got something attached to you.
Yeah, I got a defibrillator.
Right.
It's like $100,000 piece of equipment.
Right.
It's nice.
So, if all of a sudden shit sucks, you start going like this. And
you always hear about these guys that die of a heart attack.
Right.
Like that's never going to happen to me.
Right.
I might die because my heart fails.
Right.
But I'm not going to die of a heart attack.
Right.
I'm walking around with paddles. That's why I have so many great
You're ready
meals.
to go. Well, yeah. I mean, you need that 2-hour drive to fucking Managua to be covered.
I'll tell you something, though. This is why Mike Rosales is losing so much weight.
Right.
Because I almost died. His wife basically said to him, "Look here, fat ass.
Get your shit together."
Get your shit together. And that's why he lost so much weight.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, I think there's a little more detail than that story, but
that's pretty much it.
Yeah.
Also, the real thing was he saw a picture of me and him together, and he was fatter than me.
Yes.
He was like sitting in front of an ice cream bowl or something, and he's like, "That's it, I'm losing weight."
It was crazy because the first time I met Rosales, I mean, he was fucking skinny as a rail. And then progressively over time,
I'm not a great influence.
Yeah,
trying to keep up with me.
1,000-calorie stout beers per fucking pull. That'll do it to you. You want to ask the questions, Michael?
What are the questions?
Wait, how much time do we got so far?
You're at 1 hour 42 minutes.
Okay, let's do the 5 questions.
All right.
All right. Well, one person, living or dead, we'd like to share a cigar with.
Probably my mom.
Yeah.
You know, she was a big cigarette smoker.
Right.
But, you know, I visited her grave because I was young when she died.
Right.
Right.
But I visited her grave. She was born in.
Every single person I knew, how much longer they got to spend time with their dad.
It becomes a
than
benchmark, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just like, you know, I'm like, and to a point where I'm like, I need to stop this. Like, this is fucking insane. You know, all I'm doing is just beating myself over the head.
Right.
You know? So, yeah.
Well, I'm here for a good time, not for a long time.
Right, exactly. Well,
there's going to be the Skip Martin Memorial Show.
Right.
Believe me, you're going to make it longer than me. But you're going to play this, and that's the deal. Is, you know, I could take better care of my health. You know,
You think so?
I live a pretty good lifestyle, but I mean, you know, I've worked on submarines. I've shot missiles at countries,
Right.
and you know, I've been to 34 different countries or something like that.
Right.
I mean, I've had 5 passports because they've gotten full of stamps.
That's pretty good. That's pretty impressive.
Yeah, so there's not much. I mean, there's literally nothing that, like, hey, I want to do this.
Right.
That I haven't done. I mean,
Right.
at one point I wanted to be a hot air balloon pilot.
Right.
That was kind of my goal.
It's not too late.
Yeah, it's still time.
I don't recommend you doing that in Esteli, but, you know, trying that out in
Here's the problem.
Yeah.
I weigh so much
Right.
that I could only take one other person with me.
Okay. Well, Arlen's like.
That's the other thing. I've always wanted to do parachuting.
Right.
But if you're over 250 pounds, that's a no-go.
Right. It's not happening. All right.
Yeah, so those are, there's a couple, skinny guys like you don't understand that, but
You don't understand the struggle.
that's the those are the only 2 things I haven't done that I regret that I haven't done.
Right. Hot air balloons.
But I still eat pretty good though.
Skydive.
Wait,
That's
so
good.
what is parachuting?
Jumping out of a plane.
Jump on a plane with the big.
that's skydiving.
Yeah.
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 Okay.
So you have to do so many jumps with someone else,
Right.
Yeah.
and you can only be 250 pounds to do that.
Right.
So I may have missed the boat on those 2 things.
All right.
But I think that's okay.
Next
All right.
question.
What one fictitious person would you like to share a cigar with?
An honest politician.
Great answer.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think Winston Churchill's always a great answer, but
But he's a real person.
He's not fictitious.
yeah, I think I don't know. Maybe some of these characters out of the Western books,
Right.
Mad Max.
Mad Max would be great.
Right.
I don't know. I think I'm at a point in my life where it's like, come share a cigar with me.
Right.
And I don't mean that in an egotistical way. It's like, I just would rather share with someone else than,
Right.
yeah.
Then the other way around.
Yeah, there's not, I don't know. I mean, I don't know if there's anybody, we talk about master blenders all the time.
Right.
I've sat down and smoked with them.
Right.
All of them. Everyone you can name, I've sat
The
down.
fake ones and the real ones.
Exactly.
Right.
There's, honestly, there's almost almost nothing in my life that I would want to do that I haven't done.
Right.
So I've got that going.
All right,
Which is nice.
What's your favorite cigar?
My favorite cigar of all time is the Eladio Diaz birthday cigar, specifically the 54-year-old one.
Okay.
Doc Diaz for a while David Diaz would give me, that was one of my always annual weasel attempts, was to get a couple of these off of Doc, and it's always a great cigar. Now they've kind of commercialized it. It's not as what it used to be, but that's my favorite that I've ever smoked.
Right.
What's your favorite Roma craft cigar?
I smoke more tobacco than I smoke cigars,
Right.
which Mike can relate to. But I smoke the Intrigue more than anything. But I oscillate between, like, if you go to my house, because like generally when they're packaging something, I'll grab some Segundos. So like in my house right now, I have the Aquitaine Macedon, the Chromatic Macedon. I've got the Don Bosco.
Right.
I've got. I've always got some Neanderthals, usually the HS, the Fiorellas, the Wonderlust Robusto, the HOXD, the short Neanderthal. Because what happens is I smoke. I'm up 20 hours a day, 18 hours a day, so I smoke constantly.
Right.
So I generally will smoke.
More than 1.7 a month.
Yeah, I generally smoke probably 10 or 12 a day. No bullshit.
Right.
But I sometimes, especially when I'm working, I don't get a lot of time sitting there just smoking.
Right.
So I'll smoke a cigar for 30 or 40 minutes, and I switch to a different cigar for 30 or 40 minutes. Then I'll start smoking tobacco and smoke a half inch, smoke a half inch, smoke a half inch. A lot of times when stuff's coming out of packaging, I'll grab a few just to make sure that they're good. Sometimes when there's something aging that we want to take out, and I'm not sure if it's ready or not, I'll grab one and smoke an inch of it. A lot of times I'll cut cigars in half, start it in the middle,
Right.
kind of see how it is. But
You'll also trim the wrapper off of a foot of a cigar.
I do that a lot, especially cigars I haven't smoked before.
Right. Get the
Yeah.
experience of the different, the filler, binder,
Yeah.
and wrapper all differently.
So it changes a lot. I mean, I get the advantage of I can walk in and grab.
Anything.
I have
Right.
300,000 or 400,000 cigars at any given time.
Right.
I like stuff right off the table too a lot.
As long as Esteban doesn't charge you for them.
He does.
I was gonna ask about the ones that Fiorella found.
Oh,
and
when she
tossed on the
when
floor.
she turned my tray over.
It's just-
She's actually pretty good. She'll go grab a cigar and she knows the difference between them. So, like you say, go get me the brown one, go get me the black one, go
Right.
get me
Chromag, the
the yeah.
Octane.
Or sometimes she just brings you her cigar because she
Right.
wants you to smoke the Fiorella.
Right, there you go.
She doesn't tear them up as much as she used to.
She's getting older,
Yeah.
you know.
Well, there was that one post that I saw that there's all those cigars on the floor.
All of
Yeah,
them,
she
yeah.
kind of
Yeah.
knocked the tray over, and then she's like, "Uh-oh, disaster."
Disaster.
Disaster.
Her favorite word.
All right. Best piece of advice anyone ever gave you, or that you gave yourself.
No, I mean, I take advice from people all the time. I mean, so when I've thought about this question a lot from hearing the different podcasts, but I think, and this is the advice I kind of have always given my kids too, is it's not really about being really great at everything. It's about knowing when it's all done that you did everything you could do to prepare and to execute to the best of your ability. And so, like, my daughter would just fall apart if she would just get to halfway through algebra and then she was not doing well, so she would just give up and then fail.
Right.
And my point was, look, bring home a C. If the C is the best you can do,
Right.
there's no shame in a fucking hard-earned C.
Right.
But that's what math is.
But you
math
gotta
is persistence.
But you gotta fucking earn it. Like,
Right.
when you fail and you say, "Well, it's too hard. I did the best I could," but I didn't see you working on extra problems. I didn't see you asking for extra help.
Right.
I didn't. When I was probably what is Little League Pony? How old is that? 10, 11 years old?
I guess. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I had never played baseball at all. I mean, we played like at school or whatever, but I was living in Wilmer, and it was probably my worst run as a kid. And we would get into fights all the time and lose 80% of them.
Right.
I mean, half of learning how to fight is learning how to take a beating.
Right.
Right.
Right. So we would play these really rough, like tackle the man, and get black eyes and nosebleeds and fractured fingers, and it was rough like that. I mean, there was no Sharks and the Jets kind of gang
Right.
warfare, but the Bloods and the Crips. But it was tough neighborhood.
Right.
And I noticed all the kids, the tough guys, were always in this baseball, like Little League, like what they call Optimist.
Right.
I don't know if they still have that, but it was called Optimist Little League. And it was all donated equipment and everything.
Like something they could do to kind of turn them around.
Yeah, so I went down and I talked to the volunteer coach, who was, a local guy. Probably at that time he was probably 25 or something. I thought he was an adult, And I said, "Hey, I want to play baseball." He goes, "Have you ever played?" I was like, "No." He's like, "Well, look, there's two things that can happen. I could put you out there. I can make you look stupid. Then your situation is going to be worse than all these other kids. Or you can come before we practice, rake out the field, pick all the rocks out of the infield, take all the trash, do all that stuff, and I'll give you money. And then my buddy runs the batting cage. If you can walk a couple miles up the road to the batting cage, go-kart batting cage place, then he'll give you half price. I'll tell him to give you half price, and then you go in there and you practice hitting a ball, and when you get good at it, then you can come back. I'm like, okay. So I did that for like 3 months, and I would go hit balls in the batting cage until I had blisters. I'm like 9, 10 years old. I mean, I had nothing else literally to do.
Right.
But I would hit balls, and I would clean up. I would go get the tokens. I would hit balls in the batting cage until I couldn't move the next day. That's how. I would hit thousands and thousands of balls. And by the time I actually picked up a bat and swung at a real pitch, I was a great hitter.
Right.
And then I still went to the batting cage, faster and faster, bigger and bigger. And because it just became a thing that I did 3, 4, 5 hours a day, I probably hit, it's not an exaggeration, I probably hit 400,000 or 500,000 balls in a batting cage. So by the time I got to high school, and I would move school to school, I would walk on the field and say, I'm a decent fielder. I played infield, but I'm a great hitter. And they go, okay, let's see what you can do. And immediately I would make the team.
Right.
So it was, but the thing is I did all the work knowing, if I didn't do well on any particular situation, I knew that I had left everything out there.
Right.
Right. And that's the way I've done everything in my whole life. Whether it was the Navy or whether it was
porn,
college,
right,
or whether it was being a porn magnet, or whether it was the cigar store or the cigar brand. I, did all the work.
Right.
And then
gave your all.
Yeah. And I've never looked back on a situation and thought, I kind of half-assed that.
Right.
I've
never kind of wrote that one in.
I've never half-assed anything, I don't think.
Right. That's a great answer.
That's it. That's the questions.
How do people get in touch with you?
With me personally?
Instagram.
Chief Hava on Instagram.
At Chief Hava.
Skip Martin on Facebook.
You don't want to go on his Facebook page. I've got like a saying for you. I don't know if I've said it in front of you. I probably have said it in front of you, but when it comes to like stuff, how you operate on social media, especially Facebook, it's, say what you want about Skip Martin, but you're going to say something.
Well, you know what it is I'll sit and watch TV, or I read a lot of news. I read news books, and
right.
and then I'll see something, and then I'll go, this is crazy.
Right.
I really feel like, and this doesn't happen enough in today's society. So I think, everybody says don't talk about religion, politics, or sex, I guess. I don't know why you would not want to talk.
I usually say sports teams.
That's a new one, right?
That shit goes fucking nuts.
Whoa.
Philadelphia Eagles fans are nuts. Giants fans. They're fucking.
But like politics has become like that.
Right.
So, there's this, you'll be in the stands, and there's this irrational hate for some guy because he's wearing the Dallas Cowboy uniform.
Right.
But then when he comes to play for your team,
like, yeah,
exactly, and it's just based on this random. If you think about it, what religion you are is based on what family you were born into.
Right.
So socialization. What political leanings you have generally is what you were born into.
Yeah.
Your circumstances. Like me, I'm a capitalist. Obviously, I'm a capitalist, right? That's what I do. But I also understand what it's like to be poor.
Right.
I understand what it's like to go days without eating. I understand what it's like to be beaten with a fish. Those boards that they carve fish on.
Right.
With the hard edge of that thing. I know what it's like to be locked into a shed for 3 days with nothing to eat.
Right.
I've been through all those things. I live in a country where even the hardest working, most honest people will never exit the cycle of the economic situation they're in.
Right.
So, of course, there's lazy, good-for-nothing people.
Right.
Of course, there's people who take advantage of the system.
Right.
Of course, there's people who will just steal from you.
Right.
For no reason. We recently had this situation.
Right.
Right. The way I look at it is, in Nicaragua, you have bars on your front door, you have walls, you have all these things and because you can't trust the police.
Right.
Here, we just pay a certain amount of tax so that the poor people get enough to not rob you in the street.
Right.
Essentially, right? So, but I also know if it hadn't been for welfare and Social Security death benefits and food stamps and free lunches and public schools and Pell Grants and the military and all the other things that I took advantage of.
Right.
And I'm a white guy,
Right.
right? White privilege, whatever you want to call it.
You probably would have been dead a long time ago.
Yeah. Well, start a fucking
Right.
drug ring or something. I don't know. But
The underboss of Texas. Some shit.
Porn empire.
a foreign empire or something, yeah. But so yeah, that's what influences my politics is
Right.
my experience, right?
Right.
So I have the thing about politics is you can't argue ideology.
Right.
And what I mean by that is
It came back on.
Mike is pro-life. We both grew up Catholic. I left the Catholic Church years ago.
Right.
Mike still goes to church every Sunday with his kids. Even if he's out of town, he goes to Mass. Mike is really very pro-life.
Right.
Meaning rape, incest, whatever, there's no excuse for abortion.
Right.
Right? I grew up with 7 sisters, 3 daughters, a whole different perspective about what happens when you get pregnant at 13, 14.
Right.
Your uncle gets you pregnant, whatever. So while I don't support abortion, I support a woman. I mean, if men had vaginas, abortion wouldn't even be an issue.
Right.
Right? If men could get pregnant, abortion wouldn't even be a question. But I don't think it's a good thing. But if you ideologically believe no matter what, you believe one thing and I believe another thing for a lot of other reasons, we can never have a discussion about that.
Right.
You believe one way, I believe another. Let's just agree to disagree.
Right.
Right? But you can talk about a policy. You can talk about Obamacare.
Right.
And say, this issues and this is what I think and why I think it.
Right.
And you can say your piece and then we can figure something out and move on.
Right.
Right? But what's happened is the barbershop, the cigar store, the place where guys in a community would get together, the women over tea. One of the main reasons why Prohibition came around is because the religious people didn't like women drinking tea because that would allow a bunch of women to get together and talk about things without men having an influence on it.
Right.
And that's when they got these crazy ideas like they wanted to vote and do all these things, right?
Ridiculous.
Right. So that's where people in a community used to talk.
Right.
Right? They used to get together at the barbershop and say, hey, there's this good-for-nothing guy down here
Right.
who beats his wife. We got to do something about that.
Right.
And, somebody would go down there and say, look, man, you need to stop drinking. The guy at the bar is not going to sell you booze anymore. Next time I see you put a hand on your wife, we're all going to come down here and beat the shit out of you.
Right.
Right? Or somebody had an issue, or there was a political thing that was happening in a town, and people would figure it out. And because we're afraid to talk about politics anymore, a lot of those, like if you and I sit down and talk about politics, we may disagree on things, but you could eventually understand why I think, at least
Right.
why I think the way I think.
Well, I mean, that's what any normal human being
So
should
those
do.
are the kind of conversations I try to have, which is,
Right.
let's all agree it's not a good thing
Right. And can we go from there?
that our president does some of the things he does.
Right.
Let's agree. Lower taxes have been great for me this year.
Right.
Right? There's a lot of, I don't like the way the Democrats do this. I don't like the way some people do that.
Right.
But let's at least talk about it. And I feel like with so many people going back and forth with these empty arguments, that there needs to be, at least as a person who has a little bit of influence, I could use it to tell you which.
Right.
Or I can use it to say, hey, go out and vote, but know what you're voting for.
Right.
And some people say, well, you put your business at risk. And look, if you don't like what I say, and you're not going to buy a cigar because of that, then fuck you.
Right.
Like, I don't know what else to say about that.
Right.
Like, and there's a lot of those guys. Like, I posted a picture of Beto and said, look, say what you want to say about the guy, but put an honest race together. And Beto is not a liberal; he's a moderate. and he did a pretty decent job running a fair, good campaign in Texas. And I posted a picture of it, and some guy comes out and goes, "Well, if you like that guy, I got to unfollow you." I'm like, "Well, goodbye." You know, like,
Right.
This is not an airport. You don't have to announce your departures,
Yes.
right? So,
Great.
We're teaching people not to have discussions about politics or religion. What we need to do is teach people how to have civil discussions about
Right.
yes,
politics and religion.
and
It's not dealing absolutes.
one of the first rules of that is let's agree to some ground rules, which is number one, let's not argue about ideology.
Right.
Because if you believe in taxes is theft, then let's not have tax discussions because
Right.
taxes are not theft. Taxes is how we pay things.
Right.
We, as a democracy, agree to allow the government to tax us.
Right.
Do we waste money? Absolutely.
Right.
But
Is it
now
just
we can have
that?
an argument about do we spend too much on the military or do we not spend enough on educating school kids?
Right.
There's a whole. I mean, we were coming in through immigration, coming into the country, this trip, and there's apparently some kind of a robot competition going on, like high school robot teams.
No shit.
And so at the same time we were coming in through immigration, there was 8 or 10 different groups of kids coming through the immigration line. Mm-hmm. There was like all these Chinese kids, all these kids from Taiwan, all these kids from Korea, all these kids from Poland or something,
Right.
Russia, and because they were all wearing the uniforms. Like this is crazy. All these robot kids. It's like, are we raising kids to build
Right.
robots? I mean, are we winning those competitions?
Right.
Because if we're not, maybe we should be doing more of that.
Right. True. Hey, I'm gonna cut you off right there because we want to make sure that we save this content where the computer's starting to fucking go nuts.
Okay.
So,
Maybe it's a lost episode.
God, I hope not.
We'll charge for this one.
So go ahead and hit the button and save it, and if we can go.
Okay, as you can tell, we're starting to have a little bit of a technical problem with the 1972 Apple computer that I have to use. So this episode shuts down here, and let's get ready for the next one.
Hello, this is a prepaid collect call from the correctional institution. This call is subject to recording and monitoring. To accept charges, press 1. To refuse charges, thank you for using T-Netics.
This has been a Cigar Hustlers Podcast, a Mike and Mike production. Be sure to listen every Tuesday at 10 a.m. for all new episodes with some of the biggest names in the cigar industry. You can follow the guys on Instagram at Cigar Hustler for Mikey and FCC_Mike for Mike Too. You can also follow the show on Instagram at a Cigar Hustler Podcast and on the Facebook page and the all-new YouTube channel. Please be sure to subscribe, rate, and review on whichever podcast provider you choose. Thanks for listening.